Hey y'all, welcome back to Mr. Global's channel. This is part 2 of And the Answer Is. I'm going to do this every day where I answer a question from one of my followers or subscribers. Before I get into that, before we get started, please like and subscribe. Thank you all so much for my new followers and subscribers. The question for today is this. Should America go back to controlling exports of crude oil and natural gas? Second, the trade in diesel and gasoline to and from Europe raises diesel prices in the United States and reduced gasoline refining in the USA, making money for oil companies. Should this be regulated? This is a question from Nick. Thank you, Nick. We're going to cover this because this is something I've covered in the past, and I actually tried to help Congress write legislation around this. Now, to provide a little foundational stuff or baseline for this, for people that may not understand, the export of crude oil, gasoline, diesel, natural gas, the export of all of these things out of our country raises the cost of these things for us. And that is because when we ship our own natural resources out of the country, there is less supply of it here in our markets. Less supply, more demand, higher prices. Gas prices are where they are for a couple of reasons. One, the price of oil, but two, also how much we're exporting. Same with diesel, same with natural gas. So in 2022, I wrote my senator here in Oklahoma, Senator James Lankford. I wrote him and I laid out a plan for him to help reduce gas prices in the United States. If you remember, back during that time, gas had hit $5 a gallon on a national average. And that is very harmful to the economy. It's very harmful to people's pocketbooks as well. But my solution for reducing gas prices in the United States was not to necessarily sell a bunch of oil out of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, but to reduce the amount of gasoline exports and diesel exports that were leaving the country. Reduce that. And so my idea was a trigger law. If the national average price for a gallon of gasoline gets to whatever point, we can figure that out, say $3.50 a gallon. On a national average. Maybe it needs to be $4 a gallon. I don't know what it needs to be, but we need to come up with the number, right? So we'll say $3.50 a gallon. Once the national average price of gasoline hits $3.50 a gallon in the United States, a trigger law goes into effect that automatically reduces the amount of refined fuels, which is gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, that we can export out of the country, thereby increasing our supply within the country and reducing those gas prices. And that trigger stays in effect until that national average price comes back down to below $3.50 and stays there for whatever period of time, call it 30 days, 60 days, something else that can be negotiated, but it stays in effect until gas prices level out. And I believe that if this law were in place, that we would likely never use it. I don't believe that the companies would be willing to hit that mark. I think they would do everything they could to try to avoid it, because by reducing those exports, they would basically be breaking contracts and agreements with importers that exist overseas. So this isn't stopping exports per se. This is a protection barrier or lever that we can use to protect consumers inside the United States. And a lot of countries do things like this. You've probably heard of the 100% tariff that Canada has on milk coming from the United States. Never been charged. They've never hit the tariff. We have never sent them so much milk that the tariff was initiated. And the whole purpose of that tariff is that we don't flood their markets with our milk and hurt their farmers and their dairy farmers. This is a very similar piece of legislation, right? We don't allow oil and gas companies in the United States to hurt our consumers in the United States by shipping all of their product, which is our natural resources, out of the country. We could do that with diesel, we could do that with gasoline, and we could also do it with LNG. I don't really see a need to do that with oil, but definitely could do it with refined fuels and LNG. Now, the tricky part of this idea is enforcement and who has to reduce their exports. Now, the part of this law that could be really tricky is how much exports are reduced and by what companies. Now, I'm inclined to just say if we need to reduce gasoline exports by 10%, then everybody across the board reduces gasoline exports by 10%. Now, the argument from those companies will be that that 10% has a much more punitive impact on some of those companies than the others. So would the 10% across the board reduction by all companies exporting, gasoline work? I don't know, but it's a starting point. Also, there needs to be an enforcement mechanism in place, whereas if you continue to export over the level you are allowed to during the trigger period, you are then fined. And the fines need to be significant enough and have enough teeth to where they actually work. If some company is going to make an extra $1 billion, there's no point in fining them, I don't know, $100,000 for doing that, because $100,000 isn't anything when you're going to make an extra $1 billion. So the fines need to be enforced at a level where they actually are preventative and not just pencil whipped on a piece of paper because the company makes so much money, they're perfectly willing to pay the fine. And let me explain something to you. Oil and gas companies are often perfectly willing to pay fines for breaking rules because the amount of money they can make is so significant and the fine is so insignificant, they will just break the rules anyway. I have seen this many times in my career. It's a very common practice. Oh, you're going to fine me $5,000 for doing something that's going to make me $100,000? I'll just pay the fine. Those are decisions that are made every day in the oil and gas industry. Now, let me finish by saying I am a big free trade person. With that being said, I'm also a person who understands the power of massive corporations and how they can harm American citizens, especially when it comes to things like gas prices and utility bills and electric bills. And to me, these are life-sustaining things. You have to have gasoline to get to work. You have to have electricity to heat and cool your home. These are things that are absolutely necessary for you to have. And therefore, the price and cost of those things should have some type of protective measures attached to them. So it's not the only thing that Americans can afford. Americans should not be having to decide if they're going to eat or keep the lights on. So as much as a free trade person as I am, I totally support protective measures to protect U.S. consumers, especially considering the fact we're talking about our natural resources. Now, when I presented this to Senator James Lankford, he actually called me on the phone and I was shocked because I was never expecting a phone call from him. But he said that a couple of different versions of that idea had already been floated around Congress, but he really liked my version. Regardless, the idea kind of went away because gas prices started falling. And we don't do anything in this country that is proactive. We do everything reactively. So instead of doing something to prevent big gas price hikes in the future, they just forgot about it. So that is my answer today. Thank you very much, Nick. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and please give me questions to answer so I can continue to do this. I really appreciate all my followers and subscribers. Thank you so much. I'll be back on in a little bit. Thanks.